Attention youth leaders. If you have recently been called to lead the rising generation, I have a next step for you. Listen to an awesome presentation by Yvonne Hubert and Peter Vidmar, who are both respective members of the Young Women and Young Men General Advisory Council for the Church. Their presentation really helps clarify ways on how to effectively lead the youth using the Children and Youth program. They also cover topics like youth-led groups, how to lead through personal ministry, how to meet youth where they are, identifying the youth's strengths and capacities. This presentation is part of the Young Saints virtual library, and you can access it at no cost by going to leadingsaints.org/14. Again, simply click the link in the show notes or go to leadingsaints.org/14. So my name is Kurt Frankum, and I am the founder and executive director of Leading Saints, and obviously the host of the Leading Saints podcast. Now, I started Leading Saints back in 2010. It was just a hobby blog, and it grew from there. By the time 2014 came around, we started the podcast, and that's really when it got some traction and took off. 2016, we became a 501c3 nonprofit organization, and we've been growing ever since. And now I get the opportunity of interviewing and talking with remarkable people all over the world. Now, this is a segment we do on the Leading Saints podcast called How I Lead. And we reach out to everyday leaders. They're not experts, gurus, authors, PhDs. They're just everyday leaders who've been asked to serve in a specific leadership calling. And we simply ask them, how is it that you lead? And they go through some remarkable principles that should be in a book, that should be behind a PhD. They're usually that good. And we just talk about sharing what the other guy's doing. And I remember being a leader, just simply wanting to know, okay, I know what I'm trying to do, but what's the other guy doing? What's working for him? And so that's why every Wednesday or so, we publish these How I Lead segments to share. Today I'm in Denver, Colorado, or better said, is this Arvada? Arvada. I got to really turn up my Utah accent. Arvada, Colorado. But you say it with a Utah accent, Arvada.
That's right.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah, well said.
Now you are a Utah.
I am.
But you made it here to Colorado.
I did.
Nice. And you love it?
I do love it.
Yeah, that's good. And you are the bishop of the Arvada first ward. That's the last I'll say it. So.
Okay, good.
And how long have you been the bishop?
About 2.5 years.
Nice. Love it. And you extended the invitation to have me come here and do a fireside, which I did last night. And it was a lot of fun. Great ward.
It's fantastic.
And I got to attend your ward as well. So this is like a really in-depth How I Lead interview. It's like I'm like going into the experience. I'm experiencing your ward, then we're going to talk about it. And it was a great experience.
That's good.
So I wouldn't have asked you to record if it wasn't. And others will. Sometimes I just don't have time to record if somebody else does. Anyways, I'm probably setting myself up. But maybe just tell us about a little bit of your background. What makes Shawn?
My background. So I actually grew up in Sandy, Utah. Interestingly, or one unique thing about me is I didn't grow up in the church, as the saying goes.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, I grew up in what would probably be termed or defined as a part member and or less active family. Interestingly, I was baptized at age 8, largely under the influence of my grandparents, who were very devout members of the church. Mm-hmm. But between the ages of 8 and call it 18, I think I stepped into church once. So as an 18-year-old, I knew nothing about Joseph Smith. I'd heard his name. Couldn't have told you anything about him. I had a Book of Mormon collecting dust somewhere. But I was a freshman at the University of Utah, completely miserable.
So you didn't do the seminary thing?
No,
at school?
Never once.
Wow.
Never once. I was a freshman at the University of Utah, was really unhappy. By nature, I'm a very analytic nerd. Started to analyze my life and felt like, wow, well, I don't really have any religious influence in my life, so maybe I should check into that. So I actually, perhaps being very analytical, I started studying a lot of different religions. I went to a bunch of churches around the valley. After about 6 months, didn't really find what I was looking for. And my very best friend, whose name is also Shawn, he does spell it the wrong way though, was about to leave on a mission, invited me to his farewell. And using the nomenclature that we used in those days, I kind of thought, well, technically I'm Mormon. Maybe I should go to that church. So 3 days after his farewell, I was seeing him off at his house before he went to the MTC, and he put his arm around me and said, I want to challenge you to read the Book of Mormon and pray about it and ask God if it's true.
Wow.
So I did. And I got an answer, and here we are.
And then that sent you off into your own mission then.
Yeah. I literally left on my own mission 1 year to the exact day later.
Wow. So you were in.
Yeah.
And you went to Guatemala.
I did.
And great experience. And
it's fantastic.
And from that point, I mean, you've been in ever since.
Yeah,
right?
I'm all in.
All in. That's awesome. Now, is there a story to being called as a bishop?
Yeah, I think a little bit of one. I actually was called, I think one thing that's interesting about when I was called to be bishop is I was called about 8 weeks before I was sustained. Man. At least 6. So I had a lot of time to think about it and pray about it and freak out about it.
6 weeks, yeah. Right? Oh my goodness.
Yeah. So that was a bit unique. But
and what, like, tell me about those weeks. Like, what process did you go through, or what were you mulling over?
Great question. So I probably because I'm really highly analytical, I spent a lot of time thinking about where my ward was at and trying to figure out what it is that we should do as a ward. To set the context, we were just coming out of COVID. I personally felt at the time we were really kind of focused on all the wrong things. Like there's a lot of controversy around, mask or no mask, vaccine or no vaccine. And I felt like we weren't really focused on Christ, which is obviously what it's all about.
Yeah.
I also felt like COVID was massively disruptive in a lot of other ways. Like, we'd been going to church on computer screens for 2 years. And so we weren't really doing anything. And perhaps because we're going to church on computer screens for 2 years, there was no one was really connected in the ward. We had a lot of people that had moved into our ward over COVID, and no one really knew who they were because there was no interaction. And so as I focused on those things, felt like, wow, what my ward really needs is unity. Mm-hmm. And so let's focus on that.
Yeah. And unity is one of those principles that every ward's sort of striving towards that. And, you think, well, maybe it's more activities, maybe it's more, munch and mingles after, so how do you, like, it's such a elusive principle. So how did you get after it?
Great question. So the context I'll give you is I've been in brand marketing for a couple of decades and love it and love brands and love the power of branding and certainly believe in it. And so as I thought about how do I communicate the concept of unity to my ward, I actually decided to brand it. And so
this is so cool because I got a T-shirt.
You do,
yeah.
So I decided to brand our ward, and I was remembering the story of Enoch and the concept of becoming one. And so I perhaps fortuitously, because we're the Arvada First Ward, the concept became we're Arvada One.
Yeah.
So since that period of time, I refer to our ward as Arvada One, and no good brand exists without a logo. So I had a logo designed. And in my personal opinion, you can't really have a brand until you have one on a T-shirt. So everybody's got an Arvada One T-shirt.
Yeah.
So do you, actually.
I do.
You're part of the crowd.
I am. And this was cool to see at the fireside. Like people, it was a casual fireside in the culture hall, and people from your ward showing up in this T-shirt.
Yeah.
And again, it's not like there's something magic about the cotton in the T-shirt, but
no, they were cheap.
It's a symbol, right? It's a symbol of like, this is my team. This is my ward.
Yeah.
That's powerful.
Yeah.
And now this concept of branding, I think it would be we're two marketing geeks. And so we're like, get it.
Yeah.
Like, but most people don't realize the water they're swimming in. Like when you walk into Walmart or McDonald's, like there's a feeling there that if it was any bit different, or if they just took a Target and put a Walmart sign on, like it would be like something's off here. And so the brand is so crucial. And there's departments in the church that handle the branding of the church. And
sure.
when you see general conference, there's certain there's just a brand there, right? And so, like, what could the lay leader better learn? I mean, other than get a logo and print T-shirts. But I mean, how can we process this concept of creating a brand, and then how do we establish it?
Yeah, great question. Well, aside from a logo and T-shirts, I think that, ultimately a brand represents a collection of thoughts or perceptions about a specific thing, right? Mm-hmm. Oftentimes a product or a service. So I think as we think about our wards, what are the thoughts and perceptions that we want our members to have about our ward as a collective group, mm-hmm. right? And so in our particular case, we were lucky to be the first word and be able to use the word one as opposed to maybe, the Arvada 12th word, so to speak. But by way of communicating one, we went about trying to alter the perceptions of the time and talk about how we were going to work together as one to be at one with Christ. And so I do think that we were able to influence the perception of we're going to work together. We got each other's back. We're going to focus on supporting each other as we do this. And I do think that there was a mental shift for how our members actually perceive us as a ward. I think having a conscious discussion or putting conscious thought into what do we want our ward to stand for, and and what are we going to do in order to actually drive those perceptions and drive those associations, I think is worth thinking about.
Yeah. So in the beginning, were there like meetings, or like you gathered them all together and sort of went through those values of what the brand means, or what did the step-by-step there look like?
Yeah, great question. I think, so it started with, on the day that I was sustained and the talk that I gave or the words that I offered as we closed the meeting, that was when I first introduced the idea. I referred to the word as Arvada 1. And since then, I have, whether it be in email communication or in communication I make to the ward, I always refer to us as that. And then I always talk very openly about what it means to act as one. And so I reinforce it every chance I get. Mm-hmm. There wasn't really, it's admittedly a concept that I came up with and that I primarily drive, but I think I have definitely seen it take root and seen people actually act in accordance with it. So if you think about branding as a discipline, this, everything's about the touch point, right? What are the touch points that people are having with your brand, and what do they actually take from those touch points? And so in our case, I particularly am pretty conscious about making sure that people take away what we want to stand for when they do have a touch point with the ward or a member of the ward or so forth. Yeah.
And then once it's established and it's sort of going, how do you get it from not fizzling out? That people are like, oh yeah, remember those T-shirts? Yeah. How do you keep it going?
That's a great point. So there's 2 T-shirts. We've actually done it twice now. I may or may not have plans for a third one. Ooh. But I do think, in printed materials, we'll put the actual name of our ward and refer to our, if there's an activity flyer, it's, presented by the Arvada First Ward of the Arvada Colorado Stake, but the Arvada 1 logo still lives at the bottom.
Yeah.
So I think that, really a marketing plan is driven by making sure that touch points do exist over the course of a year. And so I definitely try to interject them along the way.
Mm-hmm. And then you've also made these attempts to, I don't know if branding's the right thing, but as far as different challenges and things, like the 90-day Book of Mormon challenge, tell us about that.
Yeah. So I talked about how when I was first called, I felt like we weren't really focused on Christ. And so one of the initiatives, if you will, to really get us focused on Christ in that first year was I challenged the ward to read the Book of Mormon in 90 days. And I wanted us to focus on doing it together as one. So, we printed calendars and created cadence, and we even instituted a way to have people share what they learned as they read every day, whether that be through GroupMe or some other communication vehicle. And but I wanted it to be memorable, like a brand, and I wanted it to be a handle. And so I branded that challenge the Bomb 90.
The Bomb 90.
And so it kind of caught fire. I actually had a priest just yesterday say, "Hey, Bishop, when's the next Bomb 90?"
Nice.
So we've actually done that twice too. We're not going to do it this year, but
yeah, because I think sort of reframes it like, because obviously there's the challenges, the bishop's challenge of reading the Book of Mormon, but it kind of creates it more of like, this is like sort of a movement that we're doing. We're all coming together, doing a Bomb 90.
Yeah.
And it makes it fun.
Yeah, it's been a ton of fun.
Anything else like that you've done that would be worth mentioning? Or?
I don't know this is the greatest brand name in the world, but in order to drive temple attendance, we created Faith Fridays. So the Faith Friday is we set up, obviously, an appointment at the temple. We get people we come to somebody's house, usually my house. We have dinner together, and then we go to the temple together. So it's a way to really drive temple attendance and at the same time connect with each other socially and so forth. And they've been a big hit. Mm-hmm. But in the interest of keeping them memorable, like we call them Faith Fridays.
Yeah. Is there anything worth mentioning as far as your engagement with the organizational leaders, Elders Quorum presidents, the Relief Society president, as far as keeping them engaged or, with some of these efforts or helping them do their own thing?
Yeah, I think so. Through the course of my career, I've learned a lot about the power and influence of empowerment in leadership. And so I admittedly don't dictate a lot of what they do. I give suggestions or maybe, ask them questions to explore things that they might consider. But at the end of the day, they've been set up, either hold keys or been set apart through keys, and they absolutely should be empowered and supported to do what they feel like they need to do. And so that's been the approach that I feel like I've taken.
Yeah. And you referenced this principle of we, not I. And this sort of feeds into a lot of what you've already said. Is there anything else in that principle that's worth unpacking? Yeah,
the concept of we, not I think I'm wired that way. Like I've always just taken the approach of I'm not really focused on me, I'm focused on the we. Mm-hmm. And what is it that I can do to help support other people in what they are trying to do? So, if my Relief Society president says, hey, we want to do this, we want to do X type of activity or whatever the case may be, my typical approach is, great, go. What do you need from me? So I tend to approach situations through the lens of what can I do to support the we, as opposed to focusing on, what does the bishop want or what does the bishop think? Mm-hmm. At the end of the day, I'm just Shawn and I'm just trying to do the best I can. And I just want to be able to support others. Yeah.
Are there any examples that come to mind as far as a situation that you had to fall back on that principle?
I think there's been a range of activities and or a range of initiatives that our organizations have taken over the last couple of years where it may not have been what I wanted to do or what I thought would be the best thing to do, but I feel like by applying the principle of we, not I, I'm more focused on just supporting them and what they want to do. Mm-hmm. And I remember when I was first called, the Relief Society wanted to do a Relief Society birthday party activity. And I remember, I'll be very transparent, thinking like, I wonder how many people would come to that. But at the end of the day, I felt like this is what they want to do. It's my job to support them. Even so much that one of the games was pin the wig on the bishop. And for those of you, since nobody can see me, I'm totally bald. So it was all about pinning the wig on the bishop that day. So anyway, I do think it's just looking beyond what I may want and focusing on what others may feel like is best, I think is one way I try to demonstrate that.
And that's an interesting thing in contrast with the branding thing, because sometimes people can go too far into the brand where they're like, it almost becomes a mechanism to micromanage, right? That, that's not according to our brand. So you got to figure something. But to say that's our general brand. Now you live within that world and you do what you need to do.
Yeah. That's well said. There's not an Arvada One brand book.
Right. Nice. Anything else, this related to we, not I, but you're a big proponent of servant leadership, something you do in your business and also at church. Any principles there as far as like what that looks like or how you constantly remind yourself of being a servant leader?
Yeah, I think, the way that I define leadership, at least within the context of being a servant or servant leadership, is that leadership is about bringing out the best performance in others as they X, right? As they build their careers or as they become football players or whatever the case may be. And so the way I put that into an easy example is a coach, right? Think about the greatest coach of any sport. And chances are that they've either done the sport or they've become an expert in the sport and they're utilizing what they may know in order to help further the capabilities and performance of other people. And so in my personal opinion, part of being a servant leader is making sure that I have the capabilities and the know-how and even the knowledge to be able to help support others in whatever they may do. And I may not always have that. Mm-hmm. And if not, then I'll go find it, or I'll go build it, or whatever the case may be. So,
yeah. So just in filling that, just remind yourself, like, what are they trying to be, right? Or what, because that keeps you grounded on what the point is, rather than just get the activity done or whatever.
Right.
Like,
right.
There's development process here.
Right.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. And then, so I peeked into your bishop's office. Yeah. And I thought, all right, this is different. I like this. So tell me the journey of your bishop's office.
Well, I think when I approached first being called, I think part of my intent was to change the culture of the ward, or at least have a positive impact on it. And I think that, if you think about culture as being a set of beliefs and values and practices, and you think through, well, what is it that I as a bishop can actually impact? Well, I don't dictate doctrine, so I'm not going to really impact beliefs necessarily, but I can definitely have an impact on practices. And one of the things that I feel like is important is to, I feel like there's power in making church approachable. Mm-hmm. In full transparency, when I was first became active in the church and getting engaged in the church, I was intimidated, and I think many people share that experience, particularly if you're coming into the church or even investigating the church. I think it can be intimidating. And so approachability is something I've tried to drive into our ward by way of a range of different practices. When I first got in the bishop's office, I didn't feel like it was approachable. There's this ginormous desk, and it's been there for 20 years, and it's very executive in its presence. And mm-hmm. I was completely uncomfortable. It felt like people are going to feel like they're coming to worship the bishop at his altar. And I'm like, okay, I got to get rid of this. So I got rid of the desk. That was like job number one. And I got a table from IKEA. It's awesome. It sits in the corner. And as a result of that, I sit on the same chairs everybody else does. And so I've tried to make it a place that people would feel they could approach and feel comfortable in.
All right. So I want to come back to this principle. I love that, making church approachable. And then, but you also have this beautiful flat screen TV on the wall, right? Your stake president's sitting there like, wait a minute, I need to stop. And which is cool, especially, in 2024, there's so much you can reference, electronically, and to have that there. How do you use it? Anything worth mentioning as far as how you use it? Yeah,
that's what I display agendas on. I utilize it much like I use flat screen TVs in my office. Mm-hmm. Like we display agendas, or I teach lessons to the priests, and we watch videos and try to utilize the content and the technology that we can in order to make for the best experience possible. So. Yeah.
Now, I don't know if this is a standard issue, but I also walked by your materials center, and you had 4 huge, TV carts in there. And I'm like, because I remember, like, even my wife taught a Relief Society in our last ward, and it was like my job to jump up after sacrament meeting, beeline it to the materials center so I get first dibs on the TV. I think they had 2 TVs, right? So I got to get the big one, right?
Right.
So my wife can teach her lesson. But is that you're doing, or that just?
No, those admittedly just showed up. I don't know how they got there.
Well, I think it should be standard issue that, right. And maybe they do. I don't know. I've been out of the business for a while, but anything else with making church approachable? Like, how else does that show up in your leadership or in your ward?
Yeah, I think, one of the things I've done a range of times was like last night, like when we have certain devotionals or activities where you'd probably expect to have to, show up in Sunday dress. We actually take a different approach and wear your jeans and your t-shirt.
Yeah.
I got into that by way of thinking that early on, if I could make it approachable and make it comfortable, I'd probably have more people come. And I actually found out that was exactly the case. And so, there's a time and a place for everything, as we're taught in Ecclesiastes. And I think that there are certain cases where, we probably don't need to show up in Sunday dress. And as a result, can we kind of change the way people think about the activity or the event, and does that drive engagement and so forth? And so, as you probably saw last night, like we had a lot of people there. Right?
Now, and I noticed you didn't even have to announce that? Like, it's just a thing people know. Like, if there's a fireside, just come casual dress.
I think by now, because we've done it a few times, then yeah, I think that's the expectation. Early on, I definitely had to tell people, like, don't worry about wearing a suit or, Sunday dress. Just go ahead and come casual.
Yeah.
I kind of have this perspective that you can feel the Spirit regardless of what you're wearing. So if I can get a lot of people to come and have them feel the Spirit, even if they're in jeans, that's a good thing.
Yeah. Any other making church approachable examples?
I think that, this is part of our branding, if you will, but trying to make things perhaps, I've said before, and I'll say again, church can be fun. And to that point, I think trying to make it a bit lighthearted in tone, and something that's kind of fun and full of joy and enjoyable, if you will, is something we definitely try to do in the way we communicate and the way we behave with each other and so forth. Yeah.
I always go back to you hear it more, maybe in the more corporate sense of, the boss has an open door policy. You can come talk to him about anything. And no matter how wide you keep that door open, if it doesn't feel approachable, or if he doesn't or she doesn't feel approachable, the conversation will never happen, even if you speak generally about this open door policy, right? And so it's in the details you make these adjustments of asking yourself, how can we make this more approachable?
Yeah.
And if someone walked in here off the street, would they be confused or would they feel loved and want to stay here?
Yeah. Well said.
Well, this is cool. So people need a brand. Print some t-shirts and or stickers or whatever you need. But I think that's a really helpful concept to just reflect on, because when it comes to unity, I think this is like, you have to create an identity of that unity. Right. I think we're a little bit naive at times, thinking like, oh, we want to unify people, and that means they're like hanging out with each other and talking and we're partying together. But you have to create an identity that you surround around.
Yeah.
To make it work.
Yeah, I'll be honest in saying one of my favorite experiences ever is when I hear people refer to us as our Rata One.
Nice. Very cool. Awesome. All right. Last question I have for you as you reflect on your time as a bishop, as a leader. How's being a leader helped you become a better follower of Jesus Christ?
That's such a good question. My favorite. As I referred to, I think, as I think about leadership as being or bringing out the best capability in others, I have thought about my calling or my responsibility as a leader in the church to bring out the best performance in others as they come unto Christ. And just like a good coach, I can't do that unless I come unto Christ myself. And so that's something I actively try to do every single day. And I have found that by doing that, I do think I have been empowered by Him to be able to help others come unto Him. And I have also been able to find Him and know Him myself. And through that, I have personally experienced that He can change anybody and He can heal anything.
And that concludes this How I Lead interview. I hope you enjoyed it. And I would ask you, could you take a minute and drop this link in an email, on social media, in a text, wherever it makes the most sense, and share it with somebody who could relate to this experience. And this is how we develop as leaders, just hearing what the other guy's doing, trying some things out, testing, adjusting for your area. And that's where great leadership's discovered, right? So we would love to have you share this with somebody in this calling or a related calling, and that would be great. And also, if you know somebody, any type of leader who would be a fantastic guest on the How I Lead segment, reach out to us. Go to leadingsaints.org/contact. Maybe send this individual an email letting them know that you're going to be suggesting their name for this interview. We'll reach out to them and see if we can line them up. So again, go to leadingsaints.org/contact, and there you can submit all the information and let us know. And maybe they will be on a future How I Lead segment on the Leading Saints podcast. Remember, check the show notes to listen to the powerful presentation by the General Young Men, Young Women Advisory Council members, or go to leadingsaints.org/14.
It came as a result of the position of leadership which was imposed upon us by the God of heaven, who brought forth a restoration of the gospel of Jesus Christ. And when the declaration was made concerning the only true and living church upon the face of the earth, we were immediately put in a position of loneliness, the loneliness of leadership, from which we cannot shrink nor run away, and to which we must face up with boldness and courage and ability.